Hello and welcome to another Frontline Members Question and Answer. Now, today we're answering comments from our channel members on Frontline episodes and other videos about the war in Ukraine and its impact on the world stage. I'm Philip Ingram. I currently present Frontline, but I'm a former senior British military intelligence officer and NATO planner, and I commentate on all matters geopolitics, defence, security, cyber, terrorism, and anything else that people ask me to. But you know that anyway, because I say it every week. It's an interesting time in Ukraine. So let's get straight into your comments and your questions. First one comes from Marty. Hello, welcome back, Marty. And you say, it seems Pokrovsk was fully taken by the aggressors. Notice my facial expression and confusion. We shall see if they can hold it for long, but at least Ukraine used the time to fortify many lines of defense. Marty, if you've got that link to anything that says Pokrovsk has fallen, can you please send it to us? Because I haven't seen it. The Russians haven't talked about it on Telegram. It hasn't hit Twitter. The Ukrainians haven't mentioned that Pokrovsk has fallen. And in fact, quite the opposite. The Ukrainians are carrying out a number of offensive actions in and around Pokrovsk itself. Now, I have seen lots of reports of Russian flags being put up where if you look at a line on a map, it suggests that they've taken more territory than they have. A lot of this is down to the fact that we don't have what traditionally would have been described in military doctrinal terms as a forward line of own troops. We can draw a little line on a map and go, enemy that side, friendly forces that side. Because the drone warfare has meant that we now have a zone as a forward line, and that zone can be 15 to 20 kilometers deep. And we find that each side is putting small parties into the other side and raising a little flag up, taking a picture on it. That picture's being geo-referenced, and then that goes out on some of the social media channels, and people say, I've captured this, when they haven't. They put a flag up and then they've had to run back very, very quickly indeed. And it's both the Ukrainians and the Russians are doing this as well. So the one thing that I can say with a fair degree of certainty is Pokrovsk has not fallen to the Russians. And interestingly, across the whole of the front line at the minute, Ukraine is on the initiative. But please, prove me wrong. Send me the link. I'd love to read the report as to where you got that from. Next point comes from Astro. Astro, you say the fact that Elon Musk early in the war didn't want to single-handedly aid and abet a Pearl Harbor-style attack on the Russian fleet in Sevastopol makes him a selfish person, surely. Well, Astro, Elon Musk, he's got nothing to do with this. He provides Starlink. He's a rich man. He's not a military strategist. He probably doesn't understand the military strategy behind Pearl Harbor, and certainly won't understand the military strategy around Sevastopol or anything else. So he's making off-the-cuff comments, and it's very difficult to shoot off-the-cuff comments down whenever you know the person that is making them just hasn't got a clue what they're talking about. So, selfish person, I don't know. I don't know him personally. He seems to be fairly generous with his money at times, but depending whether he likes you or not. And then, he can be generous with his friendship, as we saw with Donald Trump, and then fall out with him very quickly indeed. From a military perspective, does anyone listen to Elon? No. Next comment comes from Walter. Walter, you say, how does calling for Zelensky to come to the table at the same time Trump being happy to discuss with Putin make any sense? Interesting point, Walter, and I think you hit an important nail on the head. Nothing that seems to come out from Donald Trump whenever he's trying to deal with Zelensky and deal with Putin seems fair, and there's no logic behind it whatsoever. Trump has said that Zelensky shouldn't have started a war he couldn't win. Well, the Russians started this. The Ukrainians didn't. President Zelensky didn't. And President Zelensky, if you look at everything that's gone on in the negotiations so far, has given a huge number of concessions, whereas Putin hasn't given any. In fact, Putin has asked for more and more and more. So it seems that Putin is quite happily playing Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff and the rest of his team. And Zelensky is sitting there, rabbit in the headlights every time a statement comes out of Trump. Sometimes that's from a good perspective. A lot of the time, it's from a less than good perspective. However, the one thing I will say is wider US support for Ukraine is solid. And I don't think from a pure economic perspective, Donald Trump is going to stop the supply of weapons to Ukraine because they're being paid for by the Europeans. And as far as Donald Trump's concerned, that's a good deal. And he's all about the deal. So next point, back to Marty again. Marty, you say, I think the important note is what happens to the Zaporizhzhia power plant. Currently, it's under Russian control, but Ukraine might take it back. Yes, they might. Ukraine is carrying out a number of fairly successful counteroffensives across the whole of the front line and in the Zaporizhzhia region. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is critically important to Ukraine. It's important to the Russians as well for their captured areas and supplying power back up into Russia. So it's something that there'll be a bit of a fight over, but being a nuclear power plant, it's not something that we want people to fight over a little bit too much. At the moment, it is still supplying power to both sides, and therefore it is better that that continues rather than fighting, shut it down completely and potentially damage it catastrophically, which is something that we wouldn't want. But its importance has been highlighted in the fact that it does feature fairly frequently in the negotiations as a separate line. So something that we need to watch. At least we know the International Atomic Energy Authority are getting in and out again to be able to inspect it and make sure that the practices are as safe as they can be in a war zone. And then final point comes from Astro again. And you say, for America to put pressure on Putin, surely the Americans must put pressure on Congress. The Americans, I think, should put pressure on Congress. It's interesting, the importance of Congress. You know, President Zelensky this week, whenever he was giving an interview to another channel, I'll not mention it, or not mention the fact that it was the BBC, when asked a direct question as to what he thought of any peace deal that was going to be signed by Trump, Zelensky very quickly said, no, the peace deal is going to last 25, 30 years. The security guarantees elements of it, 25, 30 years. And therefore, presidents will change. And therefore, it must be underpinned by Congress. It must be signed into law. And it was him that emphasized Congress. And yes, I think Americans should put pressure on Congress. And I think we might just see that in the midterms that are coming up later this year. And I think Trump is worried about what's going to happen in the midterms. But yes, interesting point. One will keep watching. And as ever, folks, thank you for watching this week's question and answer and posting your questions. Remember, if you want exclusive access to our videos and to have your questions answered, please sign up for membership. There should be a link somewhere below. I think they've got it working now. I hope it is. If it isn't, let us know. And remember, Frontline is still available on Times Radio overnight programming if you're in the UK at about 01:35 hours every morning. Or if you're in the United States, in Eastern Standard Time, that's what, 20:35? So early evening, just after you've finished eating, before you go to bed, you can sit and listen to my dulcet tones with Kate Gerbeau and Louis Sykes, depending on who it is that is carrying out the interviews. But please listen to us at those times, or you can always get us on your favorite podcast platforms. Just search for Times Radio Frontline. Thank you. Goodbye.